Call to order. Meeting of the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District Board of Managers, March 14, 2024. All managers are present except Manager Hejmati and Manager Miller. We have a quorum. And the first item here is swearing in the new reappointees, Mr. Smith, Mr. Manager Sando, and I.
President White, Manager Sando, if you both stand and raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Sherry White,
I, Sherry White,
Stephen Sando,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the constitutions of the United States
that I will support the constitutions of the United States
That
and
I
the
will.
state of Minnesota,
I will support the Constitution of the United States and the state of Minnesota,
and will faithfully discharge the duties
and will faithfully discharge the duties
and will faithfully discharge the duties
of the office of manager
of the office of manager
of the office of manager
of the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District
of the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District
of the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District
to the best of my judgment and ability.
to the best of my judgment and ability.
to my best of my judgment and ability.
Very good. Congratulations.
Is there a member of the public who wishes to address the board on a matter that is not on the agenda? Then we'll move on to approval of the agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Manager Maxwell, is there a second?
Second.
Manager Sando, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? On the consent agenda, we have approval of the minutes of the February 22nd, 2024 board meeting, and one resolution, 24014, which is approval of the 9 Mile Creek Watershed District Joint Powers Agreement. Is there a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
So moved.
Manager Olson, is there a second?
Second.
Manager Loftus, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? I have one meeting to report for myself. Earlier this week, I went to the meeting with, to brief Councilmember Lene Palmisano in Minneapolis about what we've done so far and the partnership among the North Ward City and District. Mr. Whisker presented, and it was very well received. Councilmember Palmisano said she'd be happy to be a member of the steering committee, which was a good thing. Manager Loftus, can you report on the Operations and Programs Committee meeting?
Yes. Thank you, President White. Earlier this evening, we discussed the County Road 6 pond retrofits. We received an update from staff on the feasibility study outcomes. And it's a partnership where it's a partnership project on an underperforming existing pond. And it'll be back to the full board in May.
Thank you. The upcoming meetings are shown in our agenda, including Citizens Advisory Committee with Manager Olson as liaison. And in April, the Minnesota Metro Watersheds will be having their quarterly meeting. The next item of business is 10.1, the East Auburn Wetland Public Hearing. Ms. Green.
Good evening. Good evening, President White and Board of Managers and members of the public. It's my pleasure to bring forward to you this evening the consideration of the East Auburn Wetland Restoration Project. In preparation for this evening's agenda, I outlined an agenda that recognizes that before the board considers project ordering and release of the proposals for design and engineering services, The district is required under statute to host the public hearing. During the public hearing, I will provide background context on the project purpose, feasibility, outcomes, and the timeline before moving into the public comment period. Upon completion of the public hearing and in consideration of any comments received, the board may then consider action item 12.1, ordering of the East Auburn Wetland Restoration Project and authorization to release a request of proposals for design and engineering services, at which time I will provide information on the RFP. As part of the public hearing requirements, I would like to note that the resolution of support from the City of Victoria has been adopted. The project notice was published in the Star Tribune, and the public hearing notice was provided to counties, municipalities, partner agencies, and residents within 1,000 feet. Although the district is only required to notice within 600 feet, the district recognizes the value in expanding the notification to reach more interested parties. And lastly, no comments have been received to date. To begin, as a reminder, the project is located in our 6 Mile Creek Halsted Bay sub-watershed and focuses on the East Auburn Wetland Complex in the City of Victoria. The East Auburn Wetland Complex is what we consider the entire wetland system between Wasserman and East Auburn Lake, circled here in yellow. The water flows north out of Wasserman Lake through the wetland and into East Auburn Lake. Both of these lakes are currently listed as impaired. However, the district has invested substantially in these areas around Wasserman and within the lake itself. And for the first time in monitoring history, Wasserman Lake is now meeting state standards. East Auburn Lake is impaired for excess nutrients, and when we look at the TMDL of the required phosphorus reduction, which is represented here by the gray boxes, we need a total of 545 pounds of removal. Assuming Wasserman continues to meet state standards, we can quantify that load reduction of 162 pounds, and when adding the 25 pounds of reduction that the Victoria Stormwater Retrofit provides, which is a previous partnership project with the City of Victoria, there's a total of 358 pounds of removal still needed to meet East Auburn Lake standards. Based on the TMDL, the remaining reductions will primarily need to come from landscape projects. The 2017 Watershed Management Plan outlined the drainage area for the 6 Mile Creek Halsted Bay, indicating target areas for reducing that remaining 358 pounds. During this process, the East Auburn Wetland Complex was identified as a project opportunity to not only contribute towards the remaining phosphorus reduction needs, but also pilot this wetland restoration as an opportunity for the district to learn how to address wetlands that are contributing nutrients to downstream water bodies. This is related to an ongoing conversation that we've had about wetlands becoming sources once they've reached a capacity for storing nutrients. District staff then reviewed the necessary data to identify the loading source by comparing the inlet and the outlet of the East Auburn Wetland Complex. The data revealed an increase in average phosphorus concentrations at the outlet of the wetland, and in terms of loading, the wetland showed to be exporting approximately 135 pounds of phosphorus to East Auburn each year. The East Auburn Wetland Complex, in context of the remaining load reduction requirement, presents an opportunity to further our goals for addressing interning loading issues into East Auburn Lake. Having recognized the restoration potential, our staff worked to refine our understanding of the issues and drivers through a series of internal efforts as well as consultant-led efforts to identify feasible strategies for addressing the loading. Beginning in 2020, district staff used monitoring points across the wetland cells to identify whether the loading was coming from a singular cell or equally across the wetland. The major takeaways from this effort were that cell 1 is the primary exporter of phosphorus, specifically contributing 82% of that export, which is circled here in the yellow. The mechanism of that export was hypothesized to be driven by a wet-dry cycling of the wetland that occurs during the summer months when the wetland initially dries out and then later experiences surges of flushing during rain events. Following this effort, in 2022, we contracted with Stantec to refine our understanding of the movement of nutrients through the wetland, and leading to 3 major takeaways summarized here. Having confirmed the issue and driver through the monitoring efforts, we contracted in 2023 with More Engineering and Wetland Solutions to conduct a feasibility study with alternatives for restoring portions of the wetland complex to reduce phosphorus export to the extent feasible, while considering the permitting needs, the challenges, and opinion of probable costs. This effort resulted in 7 alternatives that were scored and ranked using standard criteria and providing our team with a project strategy that considers the primary and secondary alternative recommended. The 7 feasibility alternatives provided focused on 3 overarching methods, including treating some portion of the system, such as the channel, the sediment, or the inflow and outflow, physically modifying a portion of the system, such as eliminating the channel, regrading the wetland, or filling the channel, and lastly, hydrologically restoring the system through an outlet control structure was also considered. The alternatives were ranked and scored in a table that, for communication purposes, has been translated into a more visually interpretive format by representing the more desirable scores in green and the less desirable scores in red. Here we can see that based on the scoring criteria, the hydrologic restoration through the installation of a sheet pile weir received the most desirable scores and was the highest ranked option. The next highest ranked alternatives, which tied for second, were backfilling the channel with absorptive media and sediment treatment. Although the hydrologic restoration method was not scored for the highest export reduction, this method is estimated to achieve 50% of the reduction in the loading coming from the wetland. We recognize that this method is the most successful because of its minimal costs when compared to the budget, while also having low engineering complexity, a strong ability to mitigate risks, minimal impacts to the wetland, and is the only methodology that is restoring the wetland complex to its natural state. With that being said, given the novelty of restoring nutrient exporting wetlands and our understanding of the complexity of the issue, we would implement this method initially and monitor its effectiveness for approximately 3 years before deciding whether to stack the additional restoration methods of channel treatment or sediment treatment. To summarize our strategy, based on the recommendations received, we would install the weir between cell 1 and cell 2 and continue to monitor and collect data for 3 years before considering whether we need to include the second alternatives if we find that the weir is only successful at holding the mobile phosphorus content at the surface and phosphorus contents in the channel downstream continue to increase. At this time, the district welcomes any questions or comments from the public.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. Does anyone wish to come speak to the board about this matter?
What would that entail? I mean,
If you have something you'd like us to know or think about, you may come forward to the microphone and just give us your name and address.
are they going to,
Please, would you come forward to the microphone? And would you state your name and your address? Not picking on you, it's just what we do.
sorry. Not everybody could hear me. John Gilbertson. What would it entail? Are you going to dredge the channel? Are you going to make it a more thoroughfare for water? Or the hydrological restoration, what does that entail?
Would you respond?
President White, Board of Managers, the construction and design has yet to be determined, but the weir is a structure that would be placed near the boardwalk of the wetland that's later discussed in the RFP of this presentation. The additional methods of channel treatment have yet to be considered until this restoration method has been implemented and then monitored.
So a weir, I'm sorry, I better not, is that a grading of the basin?
The weir is an outlet control structure plate that basically holds the phosphorus content coming from the cell 1 wetland to not mobilize it throughout the rest of the wetland complex. So it's holding the water within the wetland cell.
Okay.
A little bit like a dam.
So then that would prevent the water from stretching out across the wetland, east to west, north to south.
That's correct. It would prevent the water from moving from cell 1 through the rest of the cells to East Auburn Lake.
Where would the water go? Would it just stay in that area?
The water would be held in the cell 1 wetland.
Mr. Heyman?
I think I can clarify, I think what you're asking. So what would happen is a weir structure would be placed where the boardwalk is.
Yep.
And it's designed at a specific elevation, so there's a notch cut in the weir to allow for flows to still make their way through the entire wetlands. So we can't have negative impacts to either Wasserman Lake or upstream wetlands. But what we would do is hold back a certain elevation of water for a longer period of time throughout the year to prevent the wetland from drying out, which is actually what's creating that nutrient load. And then when it rains, the water comes through this channel and pushes that plume of nutrients downstream. So we're essentially preventing that from happening, where water will still make its way through the wetland, but you're not allowing it to flush in those pulses in the channel itself. So when we talk about hydraulic restoration, one of the challenges with this wetland is that that ditch, that channel through the wetland shouldn't be there. That's a historic impact, a man-made impact, where they cut the channel through the wetland versus historically, before the roads and everything else, this wetland would have been connected to Wasserman. Water would just sheet flow through the wetland itself. And that allows the water to either make its way into the ground itself or leave nutrients to be taken up by plants. So we're trying to restore more of that sheet flow characteristic through the wetland, and then it'll make its way out of that weir itself.
Okay, so it would cut off, for portions of the year, cut off water from traveling downstream.
Slow it down.
Slow it down, yep.
Slow it down. Okay. Would fish be able to travel up through there?
Yeah, I don't know if there's a lot of fish moving through the system now, but during periods of typical high water, the weir itself, the channel itself will still flow.
Okay. They installed a carp trap.
Yeah.
So there is fish traveling through there.
Thank you very much for coming forward and for caring about the project. Yes.
David Tetzloff, 8667 Buttercup Court, Victoria. So what elevation of water do you expect when the water's flowing? At high level, what level would that weir be set at roughly versus, I don't know, anything? Give me some idea, how deep would that water be?
President White, Board of Managers, that is a detail that would be explored during design and something that we have been looking at during feasibility to make sure that there's no impact to the nearby residents in terms of flooding. And I don't know if
That wasn't my
Michael
concern, it was
would
more of a curiosity question relative to what it is right now.
From the, speaking off the top of my head, I don't have the report, but I believe it's around a 944 elevation, which is probably, you're going to notice anywhere from 12 to 24 inches of water, you know, where you see the vegetation now. So if you can think about the boardwalk structure itself, it's going to be lower than that level.
Fairly significantly lower than
Yes.
several feet. Okay. And will the boardwalk structure be affected in any way?
President White, Board of Managers, this is a component of the design that we have been discussing with our partner, the City of Victoria. There is a potential that the boardwalk would be impacted or would likely need to be replaced during construction. And we're exploring opportunities for designing the weir structure in consideration of the boardwalk.
Okay, fantastic. So that's on the radar.
It
Okay.
is.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for
Thank
your
you.
comments, appreciate it very much.
Tom Sparks, 8599 Blue Stem. Right now, it seems like there's a few variables that haven't been nailed down. At some point when these things get approved, will there be another hearing as to how you're proceeding with this stuff? What's going to happen to the boardwalk and any other changes that might come to this plan between now and when it's officially?
Ms. Green,
We would be notified on that again?
Mr. Hagan.
President White, managers, and members of the public. Yes, so tonight's ordering is just to formally order the project as part of our CIP and authorize the district to be able to spend dollars on design. Through our design process with all projects, not only will we have other hearings, but we also host community engagement events, or in this instance, there will be a community meeting in a location close to the project. We'd probably talk with the city about hosting at City Hall. And that typically occurs around 60 to 90% design. So once we have an idea of elevations, if there's going to be a boardwalk fixture or boardwalk replacement, but there will be multiple opportunities to stay engaged and informed throughout so you understand what the potential are for a trail connection, what the impacts to the wetland and elevations would look like.
Perfect. Thanks.
Thank you for coming forward. Anyone else? Then we'll move on to item 12.1, which is Resolution 2415. Ms. Green again.
Again, thank you, President White and Board of Managers. I'm excited to bring Resolution 12.1, ordering of the East Auburn Wetland Restoration Project and authorization to release a request for proposals for design and engineering services before you tonight. Having concluded the public hearing, I would now like to review some relevant information for considering the resolution and the authorization to release the design RFP for this project. This project opportunity celebrates the partnership of the district with the City of Victoria, who owns the land, the trail, and the boardwalk in which the project takes place. The City of Victoria is excited to provide their support for the wetland restoration, as well as explore opportunities to potentially replace the aging boardwalk during the construction of the project. On February 26th, the City of Victoria Council passed a resolution of support that agreed to provide the district with access to the property during design as well as express the city's continued collaboration as we advance design and consider additional access needs during construction. This context is also provided in the RFP that contains the following major components. The background and project overview are provided in Part 1. The scope of work is provided in Part 2. The instruction to proposers is provided in Part 3, and the disclosures is provided in Part 4. The first section provides information on the recommended design of the hydrologic restoration methodology, as well as the purpose for this method and the work to date that has occurred to inform this method. This section additionally provides information relevant to the previously described ongoing coordination with the City of Victoria, where the partners express support for the project and, as previously mentioned, are excited about the opportunity to potentially maximize the public benefit of the restoration effort by designing the weir structure in consideration of the aging boardwalk that may be impacted during the construction. Therefore, the RFP asks the consultant in this section to evaluate the boardwalk restoration as the weir is being designed. The scope of work provides the overall budget of $550,000, and with the feasibility estimate of $300,000 being under this budget, our anticipated construction cost informed our design budget of $68,000 for tasks 1 through 3. This also delineates that task 4, construction oversight, will be contracted during the construction bid process. The tasks outline the standard protocol to develop 30, 60, 90 plans that will be vetted by district staff, city staff, the district board, as well as the City of Victoria Council, while also requiring the consultant to support district staff through permitting and prepare final plans with bid support. The instruction to proposers has 4 major components that are standard in the district request for proposals. These include the submittal requirements outlining the deadline, process, and requirements for submitting, the timeline and selection criteria describing how the proposal will be reviewed based on methodology, experience, and fee structure, as well as my contact information should there be any questions. Lastly, Part 4 of the RFP provides the standard language of disclosures. So looking ahead, if the board authorizes ordering the project this evening and approves the release of the RFP, staff is prepared to release the RFP tomorrow, with a deadline to receive the proposal submissions in April, followed by selecting a consultant by May. The timeline for implementing the project is denoted here, beginning with releasing the RFP tomorrow, selecting the consultant in May, working through design this summer, approving the final designs, authorizing the bid process, and awarding the contract this fall, followed by constructing the project this coming winter with an anticipated completion date in 2025. And with that, staff recommends approving Resolution 24015, ordering of the East Auburn Wetland Restoration Project, and authorization to release a request for proposals for design and engineering services.
Thank you, Ms. Green. Is there a motion to adopt the resolution?
Move approval.
Manager Olson, is there a second?
Second.
Manager Loftus? Questions? Manager Olson?
Not so much a question, but a comment to the folks that are here tonight. I was out on that boardwalk last week, and although it's strong and it's beefy, it is, as you can see in that image, very crooked, and a lot of those boards had to be ground down so that people don't trip and get injured. So our vision is to put at the pinch point where the land masses come together, the uplands come together, that's the narrowest spot. And if you put a weir in, it's like a dam, except it's got steps. So you got one step and then it comes to the middle part and it comes down deeper, and then it comes down even deeper. And as the water is low, it travels just through that narrow gap. As the water raises, it gets through the wider gap. And then as the water goes up even higher, more water goes through, so that you're never really causing a flooding on both sides, but it does a terrific job of slowing down the water. So where we've put one in before was on Highway 5 as you're coming into Victoria, just east of the fire station. And there's a concrete step. That's a weir, and that's our project. And it slowed the water flow from that side on the south side of 5 to the north side of 5 and then into the lake. So the vision, I guess, here is to see a permanent, well-constructed weir on top of which is a unwavering, permanently constructed, flat boardwalk. And if you've been out to our project at Wasserman, at the preserve, you've seen that boardwalk that goes out to the island and back. That's the caliber of work that we do with boardwalks. We've been in the boardwalk that's there now, the city had put in a long time ago. But now we are in a major push to connect a very long loop in the city of, and this is over 10, 20 years, a path literally that allows all the neighborhoods to gain access to these paths, these walkways. And if you look with the city management and our goal, since I'm a resident, I get to go to both meetings, but as a goal, we're the city of lakes and parks and trails. We kind of tagged that on years ago. And so this is part of a very large trail connection that'll allow almost every neighborhood in the city to get into the North Woods experience and reach over 2 or 3 blocks and get into this greenway that we call it. And so the county commissioners have been working with us. And so we do a lot of boardwalk repair. We do a lot of path repair. If you are approaching that bridge or that boardwalk, you'll see the little signs from the Watershed District that say, please do not dump your grass here, and don't put your branches here, and don't put, a weed killer and everything else. Those little signs are all along those trails. And our goal is to literally allow citizens from the entire community access to all those lakes in bike riding or walking or whatever. So our goal, the vision, is to have a flat boardwalk on top of a functional weir that slows the flow down and keeps the pollutants where they're supposed to stay and not letting them go into East Auburn.
Thank you, Manager Olson.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Are we ready to vote? Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Ms. Green, and thank you for coming. Under item 14 on our agenda, are there any issues, inquiries, or ideas that board members would like to submit for consideration? Seeing none, we will move to the administrator's report, Mr. Whisker.
Yes,
I tried not to steal too much of your thunder.
you didn't steal any thunder, I don't think. So yeah, thank you, President White, managers. A few administrators report items tonight. On the top of the billing here it's that time of the year for us to set our Citizens Advisory Committee field trip that sits as a capstone to onboarding for our new CAC members, and we usually target that around mid to end of April, sometimes into May, weather depending. That usually gives everybody an opportunity just to mingle, get to know each other, build relationships in that sort of informal setting, connect with our project work, And I think Samantha sent out a schedule survey probably last week to help narrow down a date and location. So if you haven't had a chance to fill that out, please do so. I think she's looking for responses by the end of this week. So if you haven't filled it out, a date will be set, and hopefully it works for your schedule. And as I'm mentioning Samantha, and I'll just pass along some news. We're wishing her well and a speedy recovery. She had an accident, and actually she's a horseback rider, and fell off her horse down in Mankato and ended up breaking both wrists. So one's kind of a simple fracture, the other one she had surgery on Monday. She's doing really well. Spirits are high. She's showing up to meetings and stuff. We've made some basic accommodations because obviously as our outreach and communications professional, she types a lot. So that slowed her down a little bit, but Maya's been stepping in. So I think the plans are she should be out of cast. She's also getting married this summer, out of cast for the wedding. So that was kind of like her big marker, is that going to work out? So she should be back soon. It's spring, so we're thinking about the weather and how much snowpack we've got or don't have, and how much frost is in the ground or isn't, and what that means for the potential for spring flooding. And the risk, according to National Weather Service right now, is less than 50%, probably lower than that, but that's their lowest category, is less than 50%. So we can consider flood risk this spring to be quite low. There is no snowpack, there's no frost depth really. We haven't had precip since February, and the watershed's still in the moderate drought category. So lake is at 928.6, the dam's closed, stop logs are in place. They'll probably come out a little bit later than what we might have considered historically normal or average based on how much rain we get. I feel like Manager Olson, you're just talking about boardwalk. It was a good segue into boardwalk report and the admin report. We are continuing to make focused and measured, albeit slow progress with the preserve boardwalk. I think that's been my consistent report every 2 weeks. The last several meetings I've reported the kind of the big breakthrough or big change is that we've just opened up lines of communication with the contractor, JTS, and the hangar manufacturer, MITEC, and the city building officials. Just to recap, because I know we've had some managers not be at the most recent meetings where I provided a report. We did meet with JTS individually. Jeff Smith's the principal. I heard his perspective on how he got to a point in the boardwalk with this number of deficiency, his concerns related to the continuing accrual of liquidated damages and engineering fees, which are just a basic factor of the contract he entered into with the district. He did say he's extremely committed to fixing the project. Short of all new lumber and a complete rebuild, he wants to get this thing done. And where we've really focused is, because there's a lot going on and it's kind of noisy, is discussed very clear steps and sort of gates and milestones that we want to work towards. And what we'd outlined after our first meeting with JTS and Jeff is, let's make sure we just finalize the engineering on the last outstanding issues. Let's get a package that the design engineer can accept, and then let's engage the city and push that package to the city and see what they say. And then at that point, we'll have a next step for critical path forward in terms of repairs in the field. So that's really what we've been working on. We have also opened up lines of communication with building officials. Mentioned at the last meeting, I got a nice friendly call, a courtesy call from Brian Hoffman, the Director of Energy and Building, who oversees the building officials at the City of St. Louis Park. They know exactly where we are. They're waiting for the submittal. When we're prepared to make the submittal, they've encouraged us to sit down and walk them through everything face to face, so that when they get it, they know what they're reviewing, and it'll cut down the cycle time. So they're sort of open for business and been very receptive. Between the last board meeting and this one, we've had 3 areas of movement to focus on. Skewed hangars, so hangars that don't sit at a 90-degree perpendicular angle to the header that accept the joist. And so there's skews out there all the way up to like 40 degrees. And we've needed some engineering for hangers that are on a skew that have a gap larger than state building code, between 1/8 and 5/8 of an inch between the joist and the header. We've been waiting for the submittal package. In addition to engineering, the city has just a punch list of here's how they want to receive the application. And so JTS has to prepare write-up and, move through the checklist for the city. And then the final thing that was movement through the last couple of weeks was JTS wanted to get into the field and actually do some test jacking. So part of the solution is going to be lifting up some segments in the boardwalk, max nailing the hangers, putting in the right hangers, and lowering things back down. That jacking went quite smooth. They jigged everything up. It was up and down sort of in a jiffy. One of the issues that they have is that the outside joists have a unique hanger, an inverted flange hanger, so you can't see where all the nailing is in. And they haven't, one of the defective work categories, they haven't hit maximum nail schedule for all the holes in the flange for those outside hangers. And so part of lifting it up was going back and max nailing that section to see how that would work. It's in a really weird location. It's hard to get a nail gun in there. They've had to jig up an extension. And because of where that hanger sits relative to the outside edge of the header, JTS reported, and we had video of it, and we had people on site, that when they're pushing those nails in, some of the nails are coming through the edge of the header. It's right on the edge and splitting the timber. We don't want that. So that's something that we've been considering over the last week. And we've been having a weekly cadence of meetings with the contractor, the hanger manufacturer, designer, and legal to just set 5 or 10 day goals. This is what we want to achieve this week, and that's kept things moving. So we did meet today. The goal was completing the engineering and submittal package for this week. That was sort of our weekly goal. We did receive shop drawings and calcs from MyTech for these skewed hangers up to 11 degrees, and that work is done, showing that hangers with a gap between 1/8 and 5/8 will meet design loads, and SRF will accept that. And that can get packaged for the city. We did review the concerns about max nailing on these very specific outside hangers, and we've framed a number of options for the contractor to achieve max nail condition, including pre-drilling and screwing, which is something that they'll have to do in other locations around the boardwalk. So they're going to be out on site tomorrow with Josh to test that alternative install, and we'll get feedback from that. And the final thing is he has his attorney drafting the submittal package, the actual write-up that will go to the city. So that's a lot of information. It's detailed. I don't have the slides or pictures, but if you step back across 11 defective work categories, we should have the engineering and shop drawings complete for and solutions for all of the deficiencies, and an alternative install for this max nailing issue, which means we would have all the information we need to finish the package and actually submit it to the city end of this week or on Monday. So early next week or mid next week, we should be in a position where we can begin to reach out to the city and set a meeting where we can walk through the defective work categories, what the proposed solutions are. Remember, 9 out of the 11 categories, the contractor is simply bringing everything into spec. There's these 2 categories relative to gap and sort of vertical position of the joists, and we've been working through the engineering on that and have it. So blue sky scenario, if I was sort of mapping this out, that would put us in a position for JTS to move into sort of field testing, which is testing more of the install 3rd week in April. And it's not always blue skies, so I'm anticipating that we're likely looking at May to June before we're in a position where we have resolved the issues on paper to the city's satisfaction, and that JTS is actually in a position to begin comprehensive repairs in the field. So I'll pause there. There's a lot of information. It's about a year from the contract completion date is what I'm targeting when he'll be ready to get in there and actually do the repairs. Any
Sounds
questions about that?
There aren't any questions?
Yeah, I got one.
Yeah.
So when we have the meeting with the city to go step by step, what we want to, is GTS going to be there also?
It'll be a comprehensive meeting. One of the things that we've made very clear to JTS, and I think his attorney is very keyed into, is all of these obligations are the contractors. And so we need to be careful. We're facilitating and supportive and driving cadence and accountability. But these are, you know, in terms of the paperwork and the engineering and the steps, they're JTS's to make. I think in that meeting, we'll probably take a communications role in framing out what the issues are, showing the site plan, where they're located, the pictures of what they look like, what the solutions are for each category. And we're really going to be zeroing in on 2 of the 11 where the city will be considering an alternative submittal to, you know, state building code. The other 9 are areas where the contractor's bringing things into plan and spec. We'll walk through everything. I think the city's going to be focused in on those 2 because that's, you know, squarely within their authority.
I just want to make sure JTS is there for their.
It's what's been working, Manager Maxwell and managers, is rather than communicate to JTS and communicate to the hangar manufacturer and communicate to their attorney, or at one point in time only through their attorney, is we've broken down a lot of communication barriers and we're all in the same room once a week, talking about the issues, deciding what to do next and driving the pace.
Instead of saying, well, you said this, that,
Yep.
start pointing fingers back at me else.
Mhm.
All right.
So they'll be there. Yep.
Thanks.
Anything else? Manager Loftus?
You've noted that JTS has their attorney involved, and I assume since this is a contract, we have our attorney involved
That's
as
right.
well. And we're being asked to consider a lot of alternatives to the building code and specifications. Is there consideration or extension of warranties or some sort of, you know, what's the give and take, or what are we compromising by agreeing to those? Is it your one review that I think you said SRF is the person who's doing our technical review? Is that kind of one and done and then we've accepted it and moved on? Is there consideration for extensions on warranties, or how does that, is that being considered by both sides legally?
Manager Loftus, I think the shortest answer is it is.
Okay.
We had a explicit discussion today, so in these areas where, and I think what I would follow up with is, you know, I keep giving the reports, and based on the questions today and the critical junction point that we're at, it might benefit the board to have a deeper presentation, like the one that we're probably preparing to give the city, to walk you through everything with more visuals and more detail. There are, kind of the key issue is the state building code requires an 1/8 of an inch gap between the joist and the headers. And there's a number of locations where the gap is larger than an 1/8 of an inch. The contractor's options would be to bring it into plan spec and drop in the right joist and close the gap. And there's a number of locations where they'll have to open it up, and that is going to be their plan. There's a number of other locations where, for a variety of reasons, not to get into all of them, that's a challenge. And so they have worked with MyTech, that was the hangar manufacturer that they selected, that has provided all of the formally approved hangars that the joist sits in. And MyTech has designed and model tested a custom part that the warranty would be extended with, that is essentially is called a joist extension bracket. So you've got your joist that's a little bit too short, and it's a metal sleeve steel sleeve that goes over the joist and is through bolted and closes the gap
Okay.
to the 1/8 of an inch. And so it's steel instead of wood. It's attached directly to the joist, and it allows for some vertical alignment so it can get the joist at the right elevation too, which addresses a layered defect where some of the joists have been placed, the hangers have been placed too low and they've been shimmed. So the warrant, we've discussed with all of these alternatives, the shop drawings, calcs, they need to be stamped, sealed, and accompanied with warranty documentation. So in terms of the
Great.
warranty question, that's like front and center.
Great, thank you.
Yep. Okay.
Right.
Does it make sense, would the board like, I mean, I'm just kind of presuming you'd benefit from me bringing something more comprehensive, or are you content to just get the admin reports as we move?
I feel comfortable with
I'm okay with what we have.
Yeah.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm gonna be sending, re-upping a letter of support for Hennepin County and Three Rivers who are applying to get some LCCMR
Can I have a motion to go into open session?
So moved.
Manager Olson, second Manager Maxwell. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are
Aye.
out of closed session, into open session. Fun, that's fun. Meeting is adjourned. Sorry, I forgot that part.